Nyalche Chembo Toto Ningmi Shang, Donen Manum Chembo, Nyalche Dankara Dargam Santo, Sherman, Stumba Turje Janla Kishom Sir Nishan Roar Zerni Jangamsa, Jawar Tugishan, Yelaman, Jimmy Banzo Jala, Soran. Gonjo Toban for Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban for Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban for Shinjilo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching.
Next, we will teach the Shurangama Sutra. We have already covered the 10 aspects of visual awareness. Visual awareness is mind, visual awareness is unmoving, visual awareness is imperishable, visual awareness is never lost, visual awareness never returns. We have covered about 5 direct pointing methods, 5 aspects of visual awareness. Today we begin teaching that visual awareness is not an object. Visual awareness has no external substance. This is the main principle we'll discuss. When we teach the Shurangama Sutra, I thought there should be some relatively simple parts where we could spend more time on the simple sections. But so far, it seems there aren't really any sections that are that simple, but there aren't any sections that are extremely difficult either. First, everyone needs to look at the literal meaning and also examine the commentaries of past masters and great practitioners, as well as other sources, including the analyses and reasoning of various wise teachers. Today, we're teaching that visual awareness is not an object. Actually, we've covered this before. The Shurangama Sutra is actually the Buddha's direct teaching to Ananda, and others explaining the nature of our mind, a particularly sublime teaching. So this Shurangama Sutra has been, since ancient times, whether in the Zen school, Tiantai school, or other Buddhist schools, highly regarded in the Han region. In Tibetan region, only the middle 2 chapters are found in the Derje Kangyur. I have received the transmission for this before. As for the others, it's said that Chankya Rinpoche translated it, but there's no Tibetan transmission lineage because it exists in the Kangyur. But regarding the Kangyur, in 2 versions of the Kangyur, one is in the Beijing Kangyur, which has this Tibetan original, and also in the Lhasa region. There's another Kangyur that contains it, but these 2 transmissions up to now, I don't know if they still exist, because at that time, Chankya Rinpoche translated it from the Chinese Shurangama Sutra, we don't know. And in the Han region, there wasn't previously what we in Tibetan Buddhism call transmission lineage. If there wasn't, we don't know if Chankya Rinpoche ever received it orally. This can be analyzed further at another time. This time, everyone is studying quite seriously. I see that on the days when there are examinations, everyone is quite focused. This should work well. For those who haven't participated in examinations, I also hope you should study at least one treatise, one sutra, all during this period. You must study carefully. Previously, when we were listening to teachings in the presence of our root teacher, we also had such regrets, because at that time I also had to teach many courses myself. Often, when the teacher was giving teachings, I would just listen for the transmission, taking careful notes during the teaching, but the subsequent review sessions, except for individual treatises later on, I didn't do this. Now, looking back, it's quite regrettable. So I think each of us in the process of learning, if we have time, everyone must study earnestly, because generally speaking this year, my teaching load isn't particularly heavy. Currently, we've tentatively set 3 books: the Wish-Fulfilling Treasure, the Shurangama Sutra, and the 37 Bodhisattva Practices. So today we continue teaching the Buddha's direct pointing out instructions to Ananda. In this section, today we have Ananda said, "Although I recognize that this visual awareness never returns, how can I come to know that it is my true nature?" Here Ananda speaks to the Buddha in this way. This is our main question for today. He says, "Although I already know that my own visual awareness, this visual awareness never returns," because we covered earlier, for example, how darkness ultimately returns to darkness, light returns to light, obstruction returns to walls and buildings, and so forth. Above, we discussed 8 kinds of returning. In that case, many other things, including some opposing phenomena, conventional phenomena, can all return to their own essence. But visual awareness has no way to return. With visual awareness, one has seen the original face. The original face itself is the true mind. This true mind has no way to return. We already covered this earlier, so in this case, Ananda says here, although I understand that visual awareness has nothing to return to it is the most real thing, but then how can I come to know? How do I know this is my true mind? I know that visual awareness cannot return, but how do I know what my visual awareness actually is? Actually, with each question, Ananda is still quite troubled because his conceptual thinking is quite heavy. Although he has faith in the Buddha, he very much wants to attain enlightenment, but he still can't find a point of entry. What exactly is this thing called visual awareness? He keeps wrestling with it, so he further asks the Buddha, I know that this thing called visual awareness has nothing to return to, but what exactly is visual awareness? Is this visual awareness of mine something that truly has external objects? This is how he asks. At this time, the Buddha tells Ananda, I will now question you. Although you have not yet attained freedom from outflows and purity through the Buddha's spiritual power, you can see into the first dhyana and attain unobstructed vision. He says, I can ask you today, I can question you now, or I can also tell you, although you have not yet attained the fruit of an arhat, so you don't have this kind of pure wisdom eye, because Ananda only attained the fruit of a noble one after the Buddha's parinirvana, so at that time he could be said to have not yet awakened. But through the Buddha's miraculous powers, spiritual transformations, power and blessings, you can see the first dhyana. You can see the first dhyana among the four dhyanas. This first dhyana, some also interpret as the first fruit. There are such explanations. You have attained this wisdom of the first dhyana. Actually, you have attained unobstructed vision. Unobstructed vision of what? Generally, the affairs of the entire four continents you can see. So Ananda's wisdom at that time, actually in our worldly realm, he was still quite extraordinary. You could still perceive the entire world clearly. You could also see a minor 1,000-world system. And Aniruddha sees all of Jambudvipa as clearly as seeing an amala fruit in the palm of his hand. Although this is Hinayana, Aniruddha among the Buddha's disciples was foremost in the divine eye, so he had already clearly perceived Jambudvipa. This Jambudvipa here, according to many commentaries, actually refers not just to our southern continent, but means the entire 3,000-fold great 1,000-world system. What is the reason for this? In the Vimalakirti Sutra as well, at that time, Venerable Aniruddha could perceive the entire 3,000-fold great 1,000-world system. At that time, there was this account, so he had already seen the entire 3,000-fold great 1,000-world system centered on Jambudvipa. Moreover, the entire 3,000-fold great 1,000-world system was like having an amala fruit placed in the palm of our hand, transparent inside and out, completely perceived without remainder. Everything could be seen completely. So some arhats also can see the entire 3,000-fold great 1,000-world system, like Venerable Aniruddha, who was foremost in the divine eye. The various bodhisattvas and others see hundreds of thousands of realms. Earlier we discussed the arhats in this way. As for the bodhisattvas, what do they perceive completely? They perceive hundreds of thousands of great 1,000-world systems. The vision of bodhisattvas can clearly perceive 103,000-fold great 1,000-world systems, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions, exhausting countless motes of dust of pure lands, see everything without exception. The Tathagatas of the 10 directions, no matter which Tathagata, as long as they have attained Buddhahood, the Tathagatas of the 10 directions, east, south, west, north, the 4 intermediate directions, above and below, actually throughout the entire world, the pure lands as countless as motes of dust. They see everything without exception. In the Madhyamakavatara, it teaches about the 1st through 7th bhumis, then the pure 3 bhumis, when finally teaching about the Buddha's qualities using motes of dust as a metaphor. In this way, the pure lands as countless as motes of dust throughout existence, there is not one that the Buddha does not clearly perceive. So the Buddha's wisdom is truly quite inconceivable. Ordinary beings' penetrating vision extends no more than a fraction of an inch. We ordinary sentient beings are different from the arhats mentioned earlier, different from the stream enterers, different from the bodhisattvas and Buddhas. So what is the penetrating vision of us ordinary beings? What is our penetrating insight? What is our clear perception? Actually, it extends no more than a fraction of an inch. We are merely extremely limited to a tiny bit of external phenomena before our eyes, and nothing beyond that in Chang Shui's commentary. It says that we ordinary people, for example, if there's a sheet of paper in the way, we can't even see what's outside. If there's a layer of skin, we can't see the internal organs. So we ordinary people don't have the wisdom eye. In that case, what we can see is very limited indeed. So if one is an ordinary person indeed, one shouldn't think that one's wisdom is too sharp or that one is too remarkable. We shouldn't think this way. After all, we ordinary peoples, our ordinary understanding is far too limited, so there's really nothing reliable about it. Indeed, the events of yesterday we can't even remember clearly now, never mind something separated by a mountain if there's a wall. We can't see what's outside either. Moreover, as for ourselves, for example, a scriptural quotation we memorize today, tomorrow we forget completely. So looking at many realities, our understanding is indeed very limited. Above we have 5 kinds of comparisons. Ananda is one, then arhats, bodhisattvas, Buddhas, including us ordinary people. So above these, each different level of perceiver, the objects and phenomena they see are completely different. This is the meaning. Next, the Buddha again tells Venerable Ananda, "Come, you and I shall observe the palaces where the 4 celestial kings dwell and comprehensively view the water, land, and aerial realms." Then the Buddha tells Venerable Ananda, "Today you and I together can go visit the palaces of the 4 great celestial kings, go touring just like before when the Buddha took Nanda to see the heavenly realms and hells. The Buddha often took these disciples along, then relying on miraculous powers, flew directly to the heavenly realms like this." Then they arrived at the heavenly palaces of the 4 great celestial kings, the dwellings of the 4 great celestial kings, the palaces of the celestial beings in between they comprehensively observed in the process of observing the rivers there, as well as land and aerial pathways. Aerial pathways are generally the sky roads for traveling through the air in heaven, possibly in the sky. Relying on spiritual powers to travel, there might also be equivalent to present-day flight routes, some places for aerial travel. The Buddha took Ananda to visit the 4 great celestial kings. At this time they discovered, although there are bright and dim forms of various kinds, they are nothing but discriminating impressions of past sense objects that remain as obstructions. In this process, they saw all kinds of things, including bright ones, dim ones, and various kinds of forms. When they arrived in heaven at the 4 great celestial kings, it was just like our human world. Sometimes we might go together with our teacher or with someone else. During this journey, we see various joyful and painful things, bright and dark things manifesting, various entertainments and shows, seeing all kinds of things, but all these are nothing but discriminating impressions of past sense objects that remain as obstructions. Past sense objects refers to what appears before our eyes. Dust means the 6 sense objects, which is to say the external phenomena appearing before our eyes, forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile objects. These discriminating impressions that remain as obstructions, we use discriminating mind to fabricate them, merely establishing them conceptually, leaving behind such images. There's nothing else in this process. When he took Venerable Ananda to the 4 great celestial kings, when they made a circle and returned, although they saw quite a lot, of course, within the realm of the 4 great celestial kings, some things are very prosperous, with all kinds of scenery, but actually, when summarized, they are nothing but conceptual appearances established by our discriminating thoughts, merely remaining in consciousness. Beyond this, there's nothing else. For example, some teachers also, when pointing out the nature of mind to disciples, first let them look at this world or go out and have a look. There are also such phenomena. This is quite similar. After this, the Buddha tells Ananda, you should now distinguish between self and other. So you have now finished your tour. Having finished touring, you should now here begin to analyze and distinguish. Distinguish what? Self and other. Here, self and other mainly refers to visual awareness, whether visual awareness ultimately belongs to oneself or to others. It's probably not mainly about ordinary beings and ourselves. That's not the meaning. Since you have seen the entire realm of the 4 great celestial kings, now next you can write a reflection essay, or you should now analyze whether visual awareness ultimately belongs to oneself or to others. Now I shall help you choose from within your seeing who is my essence and what are material phenomena. Now I can also help you, I can assist you in making this decision. I can decide for you. Decide what? Within this understanding, within your understanding, Ananda definitely has some understanding, because from the beginning he has always been focusing on understanding. With every question, what is visual awareness exactly? What is visual awareness? Every day, some of our Dharma friends here are quite intelligent, some Dharma friends are not so intelligent. Every day they come with one question. Their Dharma text by the end all seem to be crumpled up black, quite diligent too. That's also acceptable. Ananda is also like this every day, wanting to recognize his own mind. If this were made into a movie, in every question, Ananda would come out again to ask the Buddha a question. Is there a movie of the Shurangama Sutra? There isn't, right? Then he says in this decision, within understanding who exactly is my essence, who is oneself, and who are the other material phenomena. Today, the most crucial question here is our visual awareness. Does visual awareness ultimately belong to yourself or to something else? This question. We often also say, when recognizing our true nature, this true nature, we recognize this kind of visual awareness. Does this kind of visual awareness ultimately belong to oneself, or is it another external object? This is the most crucial point. So the Buddha says, I will also help you today because I took you there together after returning. You're also quite tired. So today I'll also help you make decisions, contemplate, then look at your own understanding, what exactly it's like, specifically whether it's in oneself or in others, mainly deciding this question. So at this time, we need to analyze this below. First, the Buddha continues further. Today, basically, Ananda has nothing more to say. The Buddha keeps speaking to him. Ananda doesn't know. His attitude, sometimes he's crying, sometimes he's laughing. The Buddha says, Ananda, extend your vision to its source. From the palaces of the sun and moon, these are objects, not you. The Buddha tells Ananda, you should now use all your capacity, then search for your seeing source, the source of your seeing, the origin of your seeing. When searching for the source of seeing from the four great celestial kings, or in our worldly realm, from the sun and moon palaces, the sun palace and moon palace, calculating from the sun and moon palaces, when you look whether these are external objects or not external objects, when observing in this way the external sun and moon are external substances, not you. First, in this section, everything is external phenomena, not yourself. So in this section, I believe that visual awareness is not an external object. Visual awareness should be one's inner mind. This mountain is not one's own mind. In the wish-fulfilling treasure, it teaches appearances are one's own mind. Apparent objects are not one's own mind. So here it mainly teaches about apparent objects. These external appearances, those are external objects, not your own seeing essence. The same principle applies to the 7 golden mountains all around. You can observe carefully. When observing carefully, although there are various kinds of light, they too are objects, not you. So when we also observe the surroundings of the 7 golden mountains, when we observe, there are various kinds of light rays, multicolored, brilliant colors, all kinds, but these are external objects, not your visual awareness. Gradually observe further. What we discussed earlier, the sun and moon, these are objects for superior practitioners. Then the 7 mountains are for intermediate practitioners. The following are for beginning practitioners. Some also have this kind of analytical method dividing upper, middle, and lower. Then gradually observe further, including clouds rising in the world and the flight of birds, the movement of wind, the dancing and swirling of dust particles and trees, mountains, rivers, grass and vegetation, and people, animals, etc. All are objects, not you. All these are external objects, not you. So in this section, whether in the heavenly realms or in our human world, all mountains, rivers, earth, everything including people, animals, etc. All these phenomena should be external phenomena, not internal seeing essence. So I think this should be speaking from the perspective of the objects of seeing from the aspect of manifest external phenomena. These should be external objects with their own characteristics. So the next section speaks from the perspective of appearances. Then the Buddha further, because the above actually means external objects are not seeing, this meaning the next section mainly teaches that seeing is not an object, mainly teaching this principle. Then below it continues to say, Ananda, all these near and far objects with material nature, although diverse and different, are equally perceived in the purity of your seeing essence. So all material phenomena have their own differences, but seeing nature is without difference. He says, Ananda, what you now see in distant places, in nearby places, various kinds of phenomena, including mountains, rivers, and earth sentient beings with feelings, all of these have various differences. What's seen externally has various differences, all kinds, with thousands of forms and attitudes, but all of these, equally with your seeing essence, are all constantly unified within your seeing, within your visual awareness. You see here, although there are various external appearances, mountains, rivers, earth, etc., but this from the perspective of your seeing, equally with your seeing essence. All are within your understanding. There's no separation. Purely perceived, so all material phenomena, all these purely perceived, are all various kinds of material phenomena, but they themselves have differences, while visual awareness has no differences. This pure, wondrous brightness is truly your visual awareness. So this luminous, wonderful, extraordinary understanding is actually your visual awareness. Here, the various different external phenomena, all kinds of appearances, all encompassing thousands of forms and hundreds of attitudes, various phenomena actually from the perspective of external appearances are diverse and varied, but from the level of your understanding. Although there are differences, ultimately within your understanding there are no differences. This is visual awareness. So I think this is what Venerable Longchenpa says. Appearances are mind, apparent objects are not mind. So this is speaking from the perspective of appearances, all the various external appearances actually appear only before the wisdom of the perceiver at that time. Beyond this, there's nothing truly existing. We should understand this principle here. Below, there's a debate and analysis. Everyone might need to pay attention to this, otherwise we might start taking flights. Today, I'm also not teaching very well, feeling a bit uncomfortable. Next, we need to teach about that seeing, this seeing, Venerable Ananda's seeing. He very much wants to know what his visual awareness is actually like. But the Buddha, through some debates or through some analogies, he gives him or uses some reasoning to point out directly to him. In the process of direct pointing out, telling Ananda, this section mainly explains our seeing. Visual awareness has no external objects, no external phenomena. This is most crucial. Visual awareness has no external objects. So how does visual awareness have no external objects? If visual awareness had external objects, if you think visual awareness truly had external objects, then my seeing, my understanding, you should also be able to see. Because if there are external objects, the Buddha certainly can see them. In that case, you, Venerable Ananda, also think that this visual awareness is an external object. If it's an external object, then you should be able to see my seeing. Why? Because if seeing has external objects, then my seeing also has external objects. In that case, just like if you have eye faculties, I have a bottle here, why can't you see it? This is also our common perception. This is the first point, so I'll explain directly. If seeing were an object, then you too should be able to see my seeing. The Buddha tells Ananda, visual awareness has no external objects. Actually, what is visual awareness like? We've also taught a lot about visual awareness earlier. Truly, this visual awareness is actually recognizing the original face of one's own mind. This is called seeing. But if we speak strictly about this, it has no perceiver and no perceived perceiver, and perceived are included in dualistic grasping. Free from dualistic grasping, realizing the nature of mind is actually seeing. It can be said to be permanent. It also doesn't depend on any phenomena, even between sentient beings. Up to the Tathagatas, this seeing neither increases nor decreases when we want to understand this visual awareness. what's said here is also relatively easy. Otherwise, if we just chew on the general text, sometimes it might seem like we understand but don't really. So Ananda very much wants to know what this seeing is actually like. But some of us say, I've seen the true nature. When seeing the true nature, it seems like this nature, they think it's some kind of external thing. So I go to see it. This is called awakening. This is called seeing. But actually, there is such an external thing. You insist there must be one, for example, with this. If my eyes can see this bottle, then the perceived is this bottle. The perceiver is my eyes. When the eyes see it, these two exist as separate entities. If seeing were an external object, then the Buddha's seeing Ananda should also be able to see, because the Buddha's perceived object is also an external object. In that case, Ananda should also see the Buddha's seeing, if seeing were an external object. Actually, here there's basically a kind of Madhyamika and logic reasoning method for analysis. In that case, if seeing were an external object, then you too should be able to see my seeing, but this cannot be accepted. Why can't this be accepted? Because Ananda's visual awareness, we also discussed earlier, he only has a little bit of clear perception, not to mention the Buddha. He doesn't even have Aniruddha's kind of visual awareness. He doesn't have a Bodhisattva's visual awareness. How could he have the Buddha's visual awareness? This certainly cannot be said. If visual awareness were an external object, then you have this fault. You'd have to see my perceived object or my seeing. My seeing also has external objects. If your seeing also has external objects, then why can't you see it? Because both are external objects. Then just like a person with eyes can see a bottle too, there should be obtainable seeing, should be able to see. This is one aspect. If we both see the same thing, this would be called seeing me. When I'm not seeing, why don't you see where I am not seeing? How is this principle explained? For example, Ananda and the Buddha, if at the same time they see the same external object, for example, a teacup or a flower, the Buddha looks at this, Ananda also looks at this generally. When we haven't examined carefully, when two people in the same place observe a certain thing, we all say, oh, we both saw it at the same time. For example, I also saw this teacup, you also saw this teacup, seeing the same thing at the same time. Actually, from the perspective of Buddhist logic, it's fundamentally different. Why is it different? I sit here looking at this. He sits beside me seeing it, but we two from different angles, the entire shape of particles, the direction of particles, the size of particles in all respects, cannot possibly be the same. We often say we two at the same time saw a certain person, but actually this is a relatively crude concept. If we really speak precisely, then Buddhist logic has analysis. My perceived object and your perceived object being exactly the same is fundamentally impossible. I might be looking from this side, I'm seeing from the southern side, closer to here, you're seeing from the northern side. But if what I see and what you see are exactly the same, then you sit in my position, my eye consciousness, and your eye consciousness should also be the same. There are many subtle faults, of course, here. We don't analyze so minutely. The meaning is, at the same time, if there is the same seeing, this would be called seeing me. The Buddha says, if we two commonly see a flower, then you have seen my visual awareness. So if you've seen my visual awareness, what kind of fault would there be? When I am not seeing, if you truly have seen it, then when I'm not seeing, for example, the Buddha first looks at this flower, then Ananda also looked, the Buddha also looked. Then Ananda says, I also see what you see. Then the Buddha says, when I'm not seeing, I close my eyes, or when I turn my gaze away, then at this time, why don't you see where I am not seeing? Why can't you see the place where I'm not seeing? Because you say our seeing is the same. If seeing is the same, not seeing should also be the same. In that case, when I'm not seeing, why don't you also, either like me, you also close your eyes not seeing my object, or I don't see, but you see there should be these two situations. Why can't you see the place I can't see? Because this place that can't be seen, you should also go look at. Because in terms of visual awareness, if it's an external phenomenon, if visual awareness is an external object, then because what you see and what I see are the same when not seeing, because this external object either immediately becomes an object that can't be seen. So for me, the Buddha, speaking this external object that can't be seen, we analyzed earlier as the dark pitch black object, also seeing the place of not seeing. In that case, why don't you also? Why? because our two objects are the same if the objects are the same. Why can't you see my object? Such a question. If you see not seeing, naturally this is not the appearance of not seeing. If you say, Ananda might be confused now, if you say you saw not seeing because the Buddha just closed his eyes, didn't look at this flower when not looking at the flower. If Ananda says you saw the place where I just didn't see, the Buddha didn't see, but Ananda has seen, naturally this is not the appearance of not seeing, then your seeing is not the appearance of not seeing, because you just said, I've already seen the place you don't see, but your not seeing and your seeing are two things completely contradictory, so that's definitely not it. At this time, it seems like the text here is like debate in our Buddhist logic, asking, did you actually see the place I don't see? If Ananda says, yes, I've already seen the place you don't see, that's impossible. Your not seeing and seeing are contradictory. So what do you mean? The characteristics of seeing and the characteristics of not seeing are definitely completely contradictory. If you see not seeing, how can there be such a place? Seeing, not seeing, seeing, not seeing, he's just there. So this still has very profound meaning. For a period of time, they all claimed it was Changyang Gyatso's. It's not Changyang Gyatso's at all. Originally, it was Ananda's understanding. He says seeing and not seeing are contradictory. This is the first step. If Ananda says, I saw the place you don't see, there's this fault. If you do not see the place where I do not see, if you, Ananda, haven't seen the place where I don't see just now, because the Buddha closed his eyes, he didn't look at the place he was seeing in that case. If Ananda also hasn't seen the place where the Buddha doesn't see, naturally it is not an object, so how is it not you? In that case, there's fundamentally nothing external. If there's nothing external, no external substance, then you say, why isn't it yourself? Because you just now haven't seen the place where the Buddha doesn't see. If you haven't seen the place where the Buddha doesn't see, then your visual awareness is not external, it's within yourself. So this so-called visual awareness, if you think it's external, then this is your greatest mistake. Actually, this principle, we can also say it like this. His Holiness also taught before, when we generally use mind to observe mind, actually there's nothing to see, nothing to see. In the Beacon of Certainty, it says, not seeing is the most excellent seeing. Beyond this, there's nothing to see. Some truly existing thing, there's nothing to see. What's said here is, if you haven't seen the place where I don't see, then this point shows your visual awareness is not external, it's internal, it's within yourself. So generally speaking, our so-called teacher-wise ones, or relying on other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to give you confirmation, of course it's a kind of condition, didn't we discuss earlier? Texts. And these are just conditions, truly speaking. You yourself look inward when looking inward, seeing mind and realizing nature. You should awaken yourself and not rely on an external object. Then you truly see. At most it's using a finger to point at the moon. When using a finger to point at the moon through the direction of the finger, when you continue looking finally, you yourself see the moon. All other indication methods, all guidance methods are actually just skillful means for our visual awareness beyond this. If you rely on this skillful method as a true tool for realizing nature, then this is probably also unreasonable. So what's said here is, if you say you don't see where I don't see, where I don't see, where the Buddha also doesn't see, then this shows there's no external object. It's yourself. Seeing is yourself. The analysis of seeing and not seeing just now, you should understand now. It should be fine to come down now. There's another one. Moreover, when you see objects now, since you see objects, objects also see you. In this case, the essential natures would be confused, then you and I and all the world would not be established. This is another kind of absurd consequence. Actually, the above should completely be our Buddhist logic reasoning method. I see that Zixuan, Uyi, and the great masters of the past, indeed this logical approach is still very clear. Although their language is sometimes a bit archaic, not very easy to understand, but actually their logical approach completely conforms to the original sutra's teachings. It should be reasoned this way, and in the process of reasoning it's necessary to say we cannot accept that externally there's a truly existing perceived object. If there's a truly existing perceived object, then it definitely cannot be established. When we study Madhyamika, two truly existing things, no matter where, cannot be established. So especially when realizing visual awareness, when seeing one's own nature, how could it become something truly existing? If there were something truly existing, then the faults would be very numerous. Below is another one. If you think that when you see external objects, for example, we see any external mountains, rivers, and earth. At this time, if it is, since you see objects, if this is also your visual awareness, also a seen object, external, just like our visual awareness is not only internal, but also exists externally, then if there is, objects also see you, then external phenomena should also be able to see you. What does this mean? I think Venerable Longchenpa's finding comfort and ease in the nature of mind and 7 treasures have some reasoning that might be slightly better. For example, Venerable Longchenpa says if a mountain is one's own mind, when the mountain catches fire, your mind also catches fire. Or just as your mind can see this mountain, the mountain should also be able to see you. Because it's your mind, there's this reasoning, this absurd consequence. Here it's the same. If you see any material substance, any phenomenon, your visual awareness is external. Visual awareness is this external phenomenon. In that case, because external phenomena are your visual awareness, since it's the cause of seeing, it should also perceive you clearly. In that case, one person would have 2 continuums. There's this fault, or some people take it as perceiver, and perceived, if your perceived object is an external object, then this perceived should also in reverse see the perceiver. In that case, perceived and perceiver would be confused. If this were the case, the entire system, the entire external world and sentient world would be somewhat confused, because you see me, I see you, perceiver and perceived are already confused. In that case, you and I and the entire world cannot be established. Generally, in our worldly realm, objects and consciousness that perceives objects are clearly distinguished. Mind and external objects are clearly distinguished. The external world and sentient world are also clearly distinguished. If your seeing and the objects of seeing are both one kind of visual awareness, then external material substances, for example, I see this pillar when seeing the pillar. Because the pillar is my visual awareness, the pillar is external since it's my visual awareness. Visual awareness might also clearly perceive you. In that case, then all worldly conventions would be completely confused. Finally, you and I, all kinds of worldly phenomena, either mutually confused or mixed into one or mutually non-established, etc. There would be infinite, countless faults. So such an establishment is definitely unreasonable. So what's being taught here? Actually, visual awareness should be when looking slightly inward. You recognize the principle of the luminous, unconditioned nature of mind without grasp or grasped discriminating thoughts. Only those who realize unobstructed they themselves are like a mute tasting sugar, completely understand to describe it with language, and thinking is very difficult to express. Perhaps it's better to understand it this way. Finally, the Buddha tells Ananda, when you see it is you, not me, you yourself must understand. When your visual awareness functions, you see the original face of your own mind and not seeing me or external objects. Visual awareness is pervasive. If not yours, then whose? Your visual awareness is not narrow, conditioned, or temporary. It's pervasive. We often speak of the Buddha's qualities as permanent, pervasive, and spontaneously accomplish these 3 great qualities. Actually, true visual awareness has such characteristics: pervasive, permanent, spontaneous. In that case, this is yourself. Besides yourself, who else is there? No one. Visual awareness is one's own immediate awakening. Beyond immediate awakening, there's nothing external, no external phenomena can remain. Why do you doubt your true nature? In that case, how can you still doubt your own true nature? Your nature being unreal, you seek reality from me, your own nature. Like this, you don't seriously understand through your own methods, not seeing your own true nature. Instead, you use words and language to seek from me. wanting to obtain it is useless, because words and language are, after all, just temporary tools. Just like after crossing a river, the boat is also useless. So you yourself don't properly observe your own mind, recognize the original face of your own mind instead. Every day you just ask me, in that case, what use is it? Some of us don't practice well ourselves every day, just asking questions. Then after asking and getting answers, they don't remember well either. What use is such practice? Indeed, it's useless. So generally in our practice process, actually prayer is very important, making aspirations is very important. In all practice methods, we should pray, often pray to the teacher. And 3 jewels, please let me awaken from the heart, especially sincerely pray. In any of our practices without prayer, it won't work. Especially before each meditation session, practice Guru Yoga. Then after finishing Guru Yoga, according to one's own situation, begin the meditation session. Such practice is still very important. Then it's preliminary and concluding practices, just like our pre-class and post-class recitations, reciting these like the King of Aspiration prayers. This is very important. Now these few days, everyone has classes every day. Perhaps there's a little pressure, but sometimes having some pressure, we ordinary people naturally have a kind of motivation. Otherwise, on days when we don't have classes, not to mention other study and contemplation of sutras and treatises, even one recitation of the King of Aspiration prayers is very difficult. So I think all of us here, if we can't do anything else, so many monastics, so many noble ones together, making aspirations together and reciting the King of Aspiration prayers, once the merit of this is truly inconceivable. So generally speaking, if we don't have special circumstances, it's best from the beginning. Sangbara, Sangbara, all the way to the final dedication. The prayer for the long life of Dakini Munso Rinpoche is a complete system. Basically, in our day, most of my own daily practices are also considered during class time, because in our practice there's also the verses of the 8 noble auspicious ones, also the Wangdu, the Great Cloud of Blessings, also the Shakyamuni ritual, also confession, also offerings to Buddha, the 7 preliminaries for purifying the mind, also obstacle removing practices, also mantras to recite, etc. There are many. After some time, when we teach the wish-fulfilling treasure, we might still need to add Dharma protectors, also need to add some confession. Otherwise, perhaps I originally thought the wish-fulfilling treasure is the sutra section, there shouldn't be any issues, but later I felt, because the 7 treasures are, after all, mainly protected by the 3 great Dharma protectors, vast as the ocean Dharma protectors, always protecting, especially during this period, unity among Dharma friends, pure view. Many aspects need attention, otherwise. Many great masters dare not transmit the 7 treasures. The reason they dare not transmit one is fear of Dharma protector punishment. Another is many people below, after listening toward Vajra masters and Vajra Dharma friends mutually disrespectful, not keeping vows. As a result, later perhaps the effect of this secret Dharma is not very good, might even break vows. So wise people generally, to protect themselves, and everyone, are particularly careful. So we might, for the wish-fulfilling treasure, our level of reverence is somewhat insufficient, still need to confess in all aspects, because these 2 days we should each recite these previous practices. Everyone must recite. When I taught other secret practices before, I always required reciting 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras, but this time I thought we'd discuss it when we get to the tantric section. But seeing many situations, it seems that won't work. So now everyone needs to confess. In this case, at least recite. More than 10,000 Vajrasattva heart mantras. I see these 2 days. Before Monday should finish reciting 10,000. Then if more, it's still better to be able to recite 100,000. We all together should confess, otherwise some places might still not work. Usually such a class as ours indeed also has great benefit, I think, this way. For example, if a war broke out later, there are few survivors, although no war has happened here, but in a certain sense, many of us who wish to study, contemplate, and practice in the end encounter various internal, external, and secret obstacles, in the end, not many of us survivors remain. In this case, one should also have a mind of rarity, then receive these profound teachings. Actually, the Shurangama Sutra is also completely a method combining Sutra and Tantra, particularly profound pith instructions for directly pointing out the nature of mind. So generally speaking, whether teaching the Shurangama Sutra, reading the Shurangama Sutra, or reciting the Shurangama mantra, it's a very profound dharma that shakes the demon palaces. There's also such a saying. So in this process of practice, perhaps whether individually or collectively, some small obstacles might manifest. With all these, we have a strong mind or maintain it with the view of emptiness, then complete this Mahayana Dharma. In the degenerate age, we won't mention any great sutras or treatises year after year consistently. For several months, several years, we wouldn't dare say this. Even 2 or 3 classes are not easy. Some of our Khenpos and Khenmos, when they go out, also know this. They prepare to teach for 3 days. Sometimes the first day is fine, the second day they almost have to retreat. Finally, they start like being liberated from hell, then flying toward Shambhala. There's also such cases. So indeed, many things are not easy for us also. It doesn't matter whether it succeeds or not, especially for those practicing Mahayana Buddhism. Actually, any matter in samsara can't be much better when good, can't be much worse when bad, in a certain sense. We can understand it this way, but from another perspective in our alaya consciousness, to plant such a seed is also precious and rare. So everyone should receive with such a mind. Today's Shurangama Sutra teaching ends here.
Kirgana jirano chupai chupun zolen droa droa
Bandara badna sadar Bandara badna sadar Bandara badna sadar